So, good afternoon, good evening, and also good morning, everyone, wherever in the world you are based. We are truly a global workplace community, and we have around 30 local hubs and 1,000 formal members all around the world. And I'm Kid Barklund, based in Stockholm, Sweden, and I'm the global lead for our hubs. Our mission within WE is to accelerate workplace innovation and workplace consciousness. And our vision is to change the world one workplace at a time. And to make this happen, we need our local hubs to really together globally and locally share and expand our workplace knowledge and intelligence. We believe that workplace is about holistics, the physical, the digital, the psychosocial work environments. And we aim to build an inclusive ecosystem where we seek for diversity in our membership to really challenge and expand our workplace thinking. So we truly welcome all workplace disciplines. And as a member, you get many benefits, both on global and local level. From WE Globally, you get monthly webinars, research, and access to events and education. And one of the absolute best benefits is our bi-monthly WE Brief, where we share latest research, studies, and articles, and give our members a brief compilation of all the key takeaways. And locally, our WE Hubs arrange webinars, panels, discussions, workshops, workplace tours, and so on. And this webinar today is an example of collaboration between our hubs. And I'm so excited about our webinar today. So let's go over to Jeff Saunders and today's webinar, The Return to Next Normal Workplace and the Asian Experience. So what have we learned and where do we go from here?
All right, thank you so much for the fantastic introduction, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone in Asia. Good morning to everybody in Europe, and good evening or good early morning for people joining from North America. Today, we're going to be speaking about the experts assessment, a study that we did over the summer last year, where we initiated a global debate of subject matter experts around the workplace post-COVID-19. And today's discussion will be with a group of fantastic subject matter experts, where we'll present some of the findings from the study. We will extract the data relating to the Asian experience, and then our panelists will help contextualize what does that actually mean and what are things that are occurring in the world today. So what's this next normal workplace and the Asian experiences? What's some of the challenges we are facing, the opportunities and the lessons we are learning? Now, as we said, we have a fantastic panel. We have Trudy Chung, from Director of Workplace Advisory Asia at Colliers, and she's also the WE Workplace Evolutionaries Hong Kong Hub leader. We have Kat Gray, who's a digital experience designer and a digital nomad and WE Hub leader in Thailand, and Parthajit Sarma, senior associate at Advanced Workplace Associates in WE Hub in India. Now, I will be acting as a little bit of presenter, presenting some of the findings from the study that we did and how it differs from the Asian experience, differs from the global experience. And then I'll be moderating the panel debate, because while I've worked in Asia, I'm not an expert on what is actually happening in the brass tacks of the developments around the next normal in Asia in and of themselves. So that's a bit of our panel today, and I'd like us to hop right in. And of course, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the study, JLL and EPOS Audio, that without them, this study would not have been able to happen. Now, one of the things that we're going to be talking about, as I said before, is that we've entered a post-vaccine era. There's many vaccines under development, and so we have to start thinking about that return to next normal. And in this, we're going to be looking at what is driving the return to next normal and some of the varied experiences that we have in a very diverse region Asia, and what can we learn from that? And for those of us who come from Europe or North America, what can we learn from the Asian experience? Because some of the markets are further advanced in their return to the next normal because they've been much better at containing the spread of the virus than places in Europe and North America, or the Americas, I should say, writ large. And what are some of the impacts we could think on workplace specialties, facilities management, corporate real estate, IT, workplace design, etc. So that's a little bit about today's topics. Now, what is this expert assessment study? Well, what we did is we synthesized the findings from 6 key areas. Today we'll be focusing a lot on workplace strategy, but we talk about a number of areas, including technology development, sustainability, remote work, health and well-being, et cetera, et cetera. And what we've done is we've harvested the insights from a number of the industry's leading experts, and we use those to assess current challenges and future priorities. The methodology for real-time Delphi, it's a methodology where we, interact with a diverse range of subject matter experts, and where they participate in a ongoing debate. Now, this debate occurred for a month, and what the subject matter experts were doing is that they were answering questions, and then they were seeing the responses of other subject matter experts, and they could then debate, change their responses, and hopefully a convergence of a consensus view would emerge, but where we could also capture the divergence opinions and why the subject matter experts in different regions came upon different answers, and we'll go through some of those today. And so what we're able to do is curate a number of views from the leading subject matter experts on key challenges facing the industry and workplace specialties that we're dealing with. And ideally, this will help you in decision making because you could orientate yourself on potential opportunities and risk using these insights, identify consensus views, explore the dissenting views, and will that change your thinking about the workplace and the transition towards the workplace post-COVID-19. Now, this is done with the invaluable assistance of the communities. Workplace Evolutionaries is one of these communities, but there, I have to give a shout out to the others as well. So just showing the broad range of insights and expertise around environmental stewardship, the business community, the IT community, the corporate real estate community within IFMA, and then the operations, health, maintenance, and safety. So it's a broad perspective that we got in on this poll. Now, we want to be as interactive as we possibly can in this webinar. So what we would like you to do is in the chat function. So ideally, this should be on the right-hand side of your screen. We would like you to respond to this question that's on the screen right now. What are your organization's biggest challenges in the transition to the next normal? And throughout the webinar, write down your perspectives, your questions to the panel that will enable us to make a more interactive panel discussion following my brief presentation. Now, one thing to say is that Asia, as we all know, is quite a diverse region with many experiences to the pandemic. You've had some countries that have fared among the world's worst. So you have countries like India, Turkey, Iran, and Indonesia that have struggled really with the COVID-19 pandemic, while you've had others who have fared much better. And if you compare them to the Americas and Europe, have done much better, among the world's best. And these are China, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, and Vietnam, who've really been able to control and mitigate the response. So we've seen quite a divergent perspective. So we're going to be dealing with a lot of different diversity in the responses. And our panel is quite diverse. We have representatives from India, Thailand, and Hong Kong. So we can get these diverse, or capture some of these diverse perspectives. Now, as we said before, we're entering a post-pandemic vaccine era. Over 200 vaccines are in development. 76 of them are focused on large-scale human trials. 6 have been approved, though we're having some questions about the viability of one of those, which is the AstraZeneca vaccine, which not only European countries have become skeptical about, but increasingly some countries in Asia, such as Thailand and Indonesia, have put it on pause. And what we can see on the graph on the right is that many countries, particularly smaller ones like Israel and UAE, have accelerated their vaccine rollout and have actually vaccinated a large part of their populations. But we still need to get 70–90% of the population to either have had COVID or get a vaccine to reach herd immunity. So there is a ways to go. There's light at the end of the tunnel, so we need to start thinking about that return to next normal. Now, we'll be talking a lot about workplace strategy today. When we talk about workplace strategy, what we want to say is the intentional strategic alignment of the workplace to the business goals, visions, culture of an organization. And it requires a multidisciplinary approach, integrating FM, IT, risk, corporate real estate, human resources, security design, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to do a shameless pitch for IFMA and Workplace Evolutionaries, if you're interested in developing your skill sets as a workplace strategist and workplace manager, there's a workplace strategy and leadership program. You can find more information about it at the we.ifma.org. But we're going to be talking a lot about this topic and some of the challenges that are there. Now, when we talk about workplace strategy and aligning the workplace to the different goals the organization has, we're having a lot of different levers that organizations will have to pull upon in this return to next normal. We have remote working and the home services around remote working. We have working near home options. We have collaborative headquarters. We have event spaces. And of course, we have new technology platforms, that are there to integrate all of these different items. So these are some of the things that we're going to be playing with and discussing as we talk about it. Now, many organizations are in the phase where they're thinking about the reimagining the vision that their organization has for their workplaces and the role that they play, and then are switching into the implementation as their societies transition to the next normal workplace. And so we're going to be talking about what are some of the challenges around that moving forward. Now, getting into the findings in and of themselves, what we're seeing, of course, is a remote working revolution, and we're actually seeing some differentiation between the results from the Asian part of them, or the Asian subject matter experts versus the global SMEs. Now, the SMEs in Asia, there was 58% of them that expected that at least 6% of the workforce or the knowledge worker workforce will work remotely most of the time. That is a much smaller degree than our globally based subject matter experts, where it was 81% of them. And this is a question that's dependent upon a number of variables, and that's because it's dependent, one, what job do you have, and does that enable you to work remotely? Two, what type of infrastructure do you have access to? And that's a question not only of a digital infrastructure, do you have a broadband capacity that enables you to work from home? But it's also about your physical infrastructure from working from home. Do you actually have the space to be able to do so? And there's some challenges around privacy, and we'll also come into some cultural aspects of the way we work in different countries that actually impacts SMEs' perspectives on our ability to work remotely. So these are some of the things that came out as quite a huge difference between the Asian experience and the global experience. Now, just to give you a little taste, I won't go into the detail on this. This is a study done by McKinsey Global Institute that shows that there's, depending on the job type and the variety, the geography you're working in, there's a number of different abilities or potential to make a number of jobs remote. And this ranges from a low of around 20–25% to a high of 91% of the activities that could be done remotely. So again, not everybody is going to be working remotely. And if you want to look at the Asian market, they were the ones that were least likely to think that a majority of the workforce would be working remotely post-COVID-19. And we see this in this aspect about why people will return to the office. And the big aspect that's different from the global experience is that, one of the aspects is also a cultural aspect. And we had the factors around the inability to work from home, which was a response that was from both the Asia-based and global-based SMEs. But there's some cultural aspects that appeared in the Asian-based SMEs around, if you remember Geert Hofstede and some of the researchers in doing comparative cultural analyses of workplaces. There's an aspect around being seen by your leadership and being seen by your colleagues. And this is something that was a fear that the Asian-based SMEs pointed to that was not pointed to in the global study is that they believe that there will be a negative impact from not being seen by your peers. And so the question is, you know, as we get more experience with remote work, is that something that we still need to bring to bear or not? Now, this has also impacts on the ways that we see the role of facility management and the business drivers impacting the post-COVID-19 workplace. You know, we have these aspects around increasing organizational agility and flexibility, reducing facility costs, and improving productivity and performance. And the main difference here with the global-based SMEs is that they were more focused on ensuring healthy and safe workplaces, and considering the density and tolerance for density that you have in many of the bullpen working environments in Asia. It's interesting to hear some of the perspectives from our panel of SMEs around why some of this differentiation occurred. I reviewed the comments from the respondents to the Delphi, but I couldn't really suss it out. So it's a good question for speculation in our debate moving forward. Now, this has implications in our discussion around that role of the office and the fewer number of workers who are working remotely, is that 55% of the SMEs based in Asia believe that the existing R&E real estate footprints will not change much, but space allocation within offices would change. And this is exactly opposite of what our global SMEs experienced, where they thought that existing footprints in large cities and major metropolitan areas will be significantly reduced, and greater use of co-working, satellite offices, and new types of workspace will become available. So these are some of the things I think is a quite interesting change and shift in the ways that the subject matter experts are viewing the workspace environment. When we see this aspect around the need for more physical workspaces, less likelihood for reduction of workspace requirements in Asia, we see that having implications on the strategy setting for organizations. Asian-based SMEs saw, you know, who should set the strategy being organizational design entities, HR, the CEO office, and of course, workplace management. But if we look for facility management, and for those of you who work with facility management in the audience, in the Asian-based SMEs did not see the facility management function playing an agenda-setting role. And that kind of comes out in our next question here, which is that Asian-based SMEs, by and large, thought that the facility managers should only be responsible for the in-office experience, 83% of them, compared to 58% of the global SMEs, who felt that the facility managers would be responsible for the entirety of workplace experience. So you have a divergence where you have Asian-based SMEs sees the field developing, with FM specializing ever more into the physical workspace, whereas global-based SMEs see a responsibility for being the ones that execute on the strategy set maybe by HR, but being responsible for the entirety of workers' workplace experiences regardless of spaces. Interesting divergence that's occurred here. And maybe there's some reasons for this that we'll get into in a little bit. And so this is an interesting discussion, and this is what we see from the global space, and it's a question about what do we see in the Asian workplace, which is that you have organizations like Facebook, Twitter, GitLab, Quora have created entities that are responsible for a head of remote work, and then they have others that are responsible for the physical workplaces to the extent that they'd have those. While you have other organizations like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise that have appointed cross-functional teams, and they've kind of merged it together into a single organization. So this kind of creates this aspects around what are some of the aspects that are limiting the emergence of or the alignment of digital and physical workplace experiences. And our Asian-based SMEs point to varying levels of technological maturity among departments, organizational barriers and a silo mentality thinking in organizations, differences in investment priorities, and a lack of resources. And the responses here are very similar, though one of the things that the global-based SMEs looked at fragmented data initiatives and, of course, hierarchical keys and of the way that data is integrated into each other. These are some of the things that come in to bear. Now, this is, again, this reflection of this divergence between Asian-based SMEs and the global-based SMEs on the responsibility for who sets the agenda on the physical working environment. Now, if we look at the facility management industry moving forward, what would their responsibilities be post-COVID-19? You know, the Asian-based SMEs saying, yes, deeper alignment with HR and IT, because that's what we need to make the physical workspaces work. We need to ensure cleanliness standards, a healthy building, and support supporting workers from home. But they didn't see that owning the workplace experience, regardless of where people worked, was a function that they needed to have. So these kind of corroborate many of the findings that we've had throughout the study. Now, this was a very quick overview of many of the insights that we had from the study, but only focusing on one chapter, which is the workplace strategy and entities that are responsible for it. And there's 5 other chapters that we can go into in other details at other webinars. But what I would do is I would recommend that each of you go out, download the executive summary. It's a quite extensive one, and you could do so for free, and you could do that at experts.ifma.org. So I would recommend that you do so. Now, what I'm really looking forward to is getting the insights from our fantastic panel of subject matter experts so they could help us contextualize many of the findings that we have from our Delphi expert assessments Delphi panel. So I would like to switch gears and invite them into the discussion. And what I would love also for you is you could please, in the chat function on your on the right hand side of the screen, you can input your questions, because we'd like to involve your questions that you have about the challenges you're facing in the transition to next normal, and we'd like to bring those to the panelists as well. So once again, we have a fantastic panel representing a great diversity in the Asian market. We have Trudy Chung from Director of Workplace Advisory Asia at Colliers, and she's the WeHub leader in Hong Kong. We have Kat Gray, the experience designer and digital nomad and WeHub leader based out of Thailand. And we have Parthajit Sarma, Senior Associate, Advanced Workplace Associates, WeHub India. And of course, me moderating the rest of the debate for the rest of the time. So I would like to start out this debate by asking Trudy this question first. We just went through an overview of many of the findings. I would like to hear, has any of these findings kind of surprised you and based on what you're experiencing now?
No surprises there, that the findings are very much in line with our own research that we have done. So we have done research across the globe, and also looking at data that's more focused around just APAC or Asia, and the trends are definitely in line with what you have captured. And the sentiment towards remote working or working from home or distributed working, there's so many different ways to call it. I think we're more and more walking away from calling it working from home, because the trends and the directions that in Asia in particular, contrary to a lot of predictions at the beginning of 2020, is that we're going to really embrace this distributed work more so than we had thought at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay, thanks. Partha, your reflections?
No, they're not surprising, but what I suspect is that the mood, the feelings would have changed a bit over the last 6 to 9 months. And I'll tell you why, because the last slide that you showed in this presentation, where you said that globally people are looking at generating a workplace experience, but the Asian experience has not been that. It's been more focused on the building itself, on the facility itself. We saw a lot of this till about September, October. I think that's what people were following. India is, I think, largely known for all these, large facilities, 1 million square feet, of space where people are actually sitting, engineers are sitting, and they're supporting some work in the US or in the West. And the whole efficiency was coming from packing a lot of people into one space. That's where the efficiency was coming in. So these organizations kept on saying that we will get back to a normal where people will work from the office. So the focus was on the office, on the building. But now, as they try to get back people to the workplace, and people are resisting, they're saying, "Well, my friends are not being called back to the office, so maybe you need to allow me to work from home as well." So these organizations, same organizations, are now saying that, hey, look, I think we may actually have to offer work from home and consider remote work as an extended part of the workplace experience. Otherwise, we're going to lose these people. So it's become a retention policy. So it has changed in that way. And so
Okay.
I would say that the mood is changing towards more of developing a workplace experience now.
Okay, that's interesting. I'd like to put a pin in that because I'd like to come back to that, but I'd like to hear Kat's perspective from Thailand. What have your reflections on the findings?
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for that amazing presentation. I'll have to echo Partha with the one caveat that the impact of the pandemic in terms of gravity, in terms of caseload, has been much lower here in Thailand. And as such, there has been less of an impression. There really has been a focus on the importance of hybrid work, but it's really sitting around 20% of companies that are honoring that. Most are really focused on social engagement as the main key factor to really design for when we're coming into the same space. So similar sentiment to really maximize the ROI of that risk exposure, but it really has had less of an absolute impact here in Thailand.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Partha, you raised this aspect around the challenge that organizations are having with seeing that, hey, you should come back to the office, and they say, well, why should I come back to the office when other people are working from home? And we see some of these varied experiences across the different countries that we're talking about. So I'd like to hear, what do you think organizations need to do to rebuild trust so that people will actually want to come back to the office when they're able to come back to the office, so you don't have that employee resistance?
Well, I think in the initial months, of course, people are talking about, washing your hands, sanitizing the office, and you had all this fancy stuff to actually do social distancing within your office. But I think organizations going forward will have to look at this a little differently. The workplace is not about a place anymore. I mean, you'll have to actually separate, I think, work from the place. And you'll probably have to look at the workplace as more of the new way of working, or new world of work, if I may use. And I would put things into 3 or 4 baskets. One, of course, is people and culture. I mean, everyone agrees that people and culture is primary. So there has been a lot of focus on actually taking care of your people. Second is, you be genuine about your commitment to the environment. It's serious now. It's not a tokenism which will work going forward. If your people are not traveling to work and burning petrol or diesel, you're actually saving a lot of money. Do something about that. Third, of course, is this whole thing about workplace experience, this place itself. And lastly, the digital transformation that we talk about, so there's a lot of talk about, apps where you can do, booking of rooms and seats and all of that, but it has to go beyond that. I think it'll actually go to stuff like AI technology, which allows you to actually integrate your building management services. When you walk into a room, your AC turns on, your lights turn on, all of that. Digitally, you'll have to tie all these 3 other things together. And that's how I think not only people will feel safe, I think organizations will also be safer that way, I think, going forward. You really have to look at it as a new world of work rather than a workplace, so to say.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know if I answered you, but yeah.
No, that's interesting perspectives. Trudy, do you have comments about that? What are you experiencing in Hong Kong?
I think building trust is, health and safety has always been like #1 priority to get right. There's been a lot of emphasis around creating 100% transparency as to what the company is doing, addressing this, what sort of measures are in place, what are concerns, and, keeping a lot of, what's happening, I guess, communicating to staffs in the first instance, and not just from, I guess, the place you work at, and also from the building that your office is located. A lot of those communications need to be really timely, and that's one way to help people feel that they know what's happening, and then they can make a decision whether they want to come back. And given the company does have those autonomy policies. And the other one I feel is important, that there's a although remote working has been, I guess, the new normal, going into the future after all the dust is settled, is important that there's a culture embraced by leaders, that they're saying this is actually the way that we are going to work for the long haul. And that transparency and that understanding and continue and enforcing that message is key for people and employees to feel that they are the way that they are going to make decisions on how to be productive in their own ways is empowered and encouraged. So so from the facility point, there's the safety measure, but from the people culture side, there's got to be that echo of this is supported and this is empowered by the leader. So they're the two folks to build trust.
Right. Quite interesting perspectives on that. So just to say, like, we need some sort of articulation of the next vision for the organization from the leaderships to kind of create some clarity about the way forward in many organizations, if I hear you
Absolutely.
correctly.
Asia is still very conservative in many ways, and if the leaders don't lift their finger, we tend to just hide behind them.
Okay, fantastic. Now, speaking of conservatism, and one of the things that I know people from the Americas and from Europe are interested in, because we hear based in Europe and the Americas of the usual suspects when we start talking about those who set the future workplace agenda that everybody looks towards. And one of the questions I have to the entire panel is, like, when we start talking about who are the trailblazing companies that are really doing some interesting things, or even trailblazing industries, who would you point to in the Asian marketplace that are saying, wow, they're doing some really interesting things about leading a new ways of working post COVID-19?
I'll take a first step at this one, Jeff.
Great.
So in the last few months, I have been doing some interesting work with a number of different people from different industries. The one that really pushing some boundary is a technology company that I'm working with, and we're looking after their portfolio across the region here in Asia, and they're actively seeking creative strategies, not just to downsize, not just from a cost effectiveness perspective, but really from the points of view that, okay, we have been doing this, we have been responding to COVID with working from home or remote working, and they are continuing capturing pulses from the employees, how they're feeling with the effects from working from home. And now 10 months down the track, they're in a position to say, well, this has worked, and what does it mean to our real estate portfolio now? And they've got global views, and then they want to use the global view as a direction, and then not to cascade, but to kind of use that as a direction to say, so what does it mean for, say, India? What does it mean in Hong Kong and in Singapore? And really creating, I guess, a lot of using the high level perspective, but not forgetting the local references. And then we are using that direction to localize these strategies, and using also the leveraging remote working as part of the strategy to help creating flexible real estate strategies. So not every case will be a downsizing situation. However, downsizing tends to be more than often an end result of a creative strategy, because, as you know, traditional workplaces have a lot of inefficiencies. So it is not uncommon to create efficiency from creating flexible environments. So technology is one trailblazer for me, and financial sector as well, because cost is very high on their agenda. So they're definitely at the forefront of looking at strategies for ongoing future-proofing, saving, optimization perspectives. So those two I feel are really creating some very interesting strategies out here.
Okay, fantastic. Kat, what are your perspectives?
Definitely. Thank you for sharing, Trudy. I would say an interesting industry that's really starting to shine and grow in Thailand during this time is the gaming industry, specifically mobile games, as they act as a proxy for social engagement to be able to gather with like-minded individuals and combat the loneliness that's been happening during the isolation of the pandemic. That being said, since in Thailand numbers have been relatively low, it has allowed for these gaming products to also encourage people to come together in person and be able to collaborate over these games as well. So it allows for this hybrid working model to also flow into social engagement as well. And a lot of the stigma against gaming has waned a bit given the gravity and understanding of the importance of gathering. So even though it used to be seen as more of a childlike indulgence, now it is really seen as an important component of social and emotional learning.
Oh, that's quite a fantastic case, because we were having a webinar last week where we were talking about the loneliness factor and what organizations are dealing with that. So I'd like to have that take up that discussion in a bit. Partha, I'd like to hear your kind of experiences from India. Some of the ones that are trailblazing there?
Well, like Trudy said earlier, Asia is a bit conservative and we like to follow what the West is doing. So when it comes to the corporate offices and the marketing and sales offices in India, I think they're very quick to adapt to new ways of working, hybrid working. But what is interesting is that all the support services organizations, people who run call centers and BPOs, they never really thought that you could actually work from home. You could run call centers from home. And in these companies, in these large facilities, seat count used to be equal to head count always. If you have 100 people, you need 100 seats. That has changed, fundamentally changed now, because of the same thing that I mentioned earlier, that if you do not allow people to work from home, they're going to leave your company. It's going to be a retention problem. So in the new projects that you're working on now, we've seen that as a radical shift. So if you have 100 people, you probably need 70 seats or 80 seats, which is a fundamental shift. And I think that is kind of like what it's saying, that it's not it's affecting everyone, and this is essentially led to I think activity-based working. And I saw it in one of your slides that in Asia the amount of real estate is not going to reduce, but the allocation of the space is going to change. And we've seen that actually in at least 2 case studies in the recent past, large facilities. And that's very true actually. Your research is, I think, valid even today.
Okay, fantastic. Just to shift gears, I want to ask a question from the audience, and unfortunately on my question, the entire name is not popping up, and I don't have the ability to expand it in my chat function right now. So Giri, I apologize for that. But the question here is going around, or Giri's question is going around. This kind of divergence between Asian FM experts kind of focusing on, subject matter experts are limiting to the in-office experience, while modern organizations are appreciating the values that FM could deliver, and many FM are part of CXO teams helping shape the workplace strategy. Do you have any insights onto why, and this is speculation on our part, around why the Asian SMEs were divergent in their expectations around facility management responsibilities about being only in office compared to the entire office experience?
Okay, I'm going to take another step. I think, Asia being Asia, we're very, very, we're trying to be not as narrow-minded now, but for Asians, for as long as working has been the way that life is, nobody ever fathomed working away from the office, really. Even, some companies did have some work from home policy, but they were of the minorities. So facility management, when people think of it, they still think of it in the actual physical realm rather than the physical and the virtual together. I think it's going to take some time to kind of, for people to expand and extend the idea into more of an experience both in the office and away from the office, and that is a topic that I feel like is definitely emerging. It's just not yet a majority yet. It's still sort of sitting with the minority of professionals, and I do believe that given COVID has really really impacted the ways of working in a positive way, that we are more in line with, you know, all the flexibilities that humans do enjoy. And therefore, I think this is going to shift slowly, though.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may just add to that, like I was mentioning, it's like a carry forward of my earlier point. A lot of these engineers who, you know, sit in the office, they sit in the office and do the work because you have issues like data privacy. You cannot take your laptop home and all of that because they're doing back-end work for, you know, people in the US or in the West. So if you cannot work elsewhere remotely, it means that if you're not in office today, the bosses used to think that he's probably out of his girlfriend or his boyfriend. That was the mentality, you know. You work only in the office, and hence I think the whole management focus was that take care of the office. Office does not exist outside these, you know, four walls. This was the mentality, which has now changed, I think.
Okay. So it's a dramatic transition that's occurring there. We have another question from the audience for Varun. And the question is about technologies, which leads to one of the questions that I had, and you know, I'd like to ask you, Kat, which is about, you know, these platforms that are designed to integrate the whole experience. And you know, you were talking previously about, you know, the gaming industry and how they're using a number of different technologies to combat loneliness and things like that, and create a different hybridity of experience. But how are platforms transforming the end user experience? And from the Asian market, what examples have you particularly found to be interesting to follow?
Definitely, that's a great question from the audience. Well, I think the macro theme is the humanization of these digital touch points, right? And in concert with gamification of those touch points to really incentivize more social engagement across virtual communication. And two of the leading innovators that come to mind are Virbela and YoTribe. There are some, you know, already normalized options such as Slack, of course, which allow for community engagement and messaging. But innovators like Virbela and YoTribe are really prototyping and are leading edge innovators for creating virtual worlds, ones wherein you almost feel like you're inside of a video game, you have your own avatar in Virbela, and they actually work with your company to customize this virtual world to emulate your physical space if you want to, or to customize it however you see fit. And that really helps to normalize that a cross-activity-based workplace model in this hybrid working environment. You can still feel some parity across both in-person and digital touch points. And YoTribe and other similar virtual conference platforms allow you to move between tables and pop into video chats and actually have face-to-face meetings via video, but also still have that experience where you're moving across different conversations. So those ones are definitely having some traction both in the US as well as in Asia.
Okay, so Virbela and YoTribe. Okay, that's Kat's two recommendations. Trudy, do you have some ones that you're following in Hong Kong?
Actually, sorry, apologies. I don't have much to contribute in this context.
No worries. Partha, do you?
Well, there are a lot actually. You know, every day I hear about somebody new who's popping up. But what has also happened is, so let me talk about the other side, a caveat sort of a thing, that a lot of organizations who used to do things for other industries have now come into the workplace industry. People who used to do thermal cameras for industry, for factories are now saying that we can do this for offices as well, without a very clear understanding of what the office dynamics are. It may work in the factory, but it may not work in an office scenario. So we just need to be a little careful and not get into off-the-shelf buying. IT is not something, technology is not something that you just want to buy off the shelf because it looks good now, because my neighbor is doing it. It has to be integrated. Like I mentioned earlier, you have to integrate IT as part of your whole new world of work. It cannot be off-the-shelf buying anymore, like, you know, access data, like security cameras, like you used to look at it before.
Right. So everything has to be fit for purpose moving forward. Okay. Now, when we talk fit for purpose and we talk about a lot of the reports and things like that that have come out, and even the Delphi here, even though we had a portion of Asian SMEs, it was still a lot of focus from Europe and the Americas on it. And so when you're engaging with your clients and customers, I'd like to hear what reports, what information, what data sources are relevant in the Asian context that you use to engage with your clients to actually help them shape their thinking about what's relevant for them in a fit for purpose environment in their context. So I'd like to hear from Kat, when you engage with your clients, what works in your discussions in a Thai context. Sorry.
Well, Jeffrey, you did share a bit of it in your question, and I'll echo something that Partha shared earlier as well, and that in this smaller market in Thailand, we are still looking at the examples of larger case studies on a global basis. And one of the major research initiatives is actually the new Future of Work Research Initiative, which was a cross-company projects consisting of over 50 separate projects led by Microsoft, but inclusive of many companies, LinkedIn, Google, etc. And one of the macro takeaways there was really emphasizing an important shift toward a more humanized and holistically minded decision-making framework, right? So moving away from the command and control parameters and really listening to the individual needs of your people to provide a safe and supportive structure so that they can really share their vulnerable experiences and in accordance with the increasing neurodiversity that is happening in isolation during the pandemic.
Okay, fantastic. Partha, what are you looking for?
Well, Jeff, I think the kind of people who has been managing the workplace, the corporate real estate leaders and facility managers, they are people who are used to working on the basis of certain benchmarks, certain indices. And what's the density of a space, how much should I spend? So they're always used to that because you have to justify things on an Excel sheet. Now, suddenly people are finding themselves in a position where they do not have these benchmarks because the workplace has extended beyond the four walls. So what do you really do in the absence of that? Of course, they're looking at, reports. They're looking at your report, they're looking at somebody else's report and trying to make sense of that. But what you're increasingly seeing is that people are trying to do employee surveys to actually find out what people really want within an organization. And I think that's a very healthy thing to do because you're actually trying to co-create a solution with your people. And one of the things we've seen is that increasingly people are trying to understand that what percentage of people will be reporting to office on a regular basis. And once you've determined that, okay, let's say 60% or 70% will come to the office, what kind of work will they be doing on a day-to-day basis? And on the basis of that is what is emerging, what we, all of us know as activity-based working, because realization has come in now that all work does not happen on the desk only, it happens all over. And on the basis of that, you're essentially reassigning your real estate. I think that's what is happening. So a bit of data from secondary data from reports like this, but at the same time, organizations are doing their own surveys to actually find out these ratios and numbers and all of that. Because at the end of the day, any management decision has to be justified on that spreadsheet. And that's why they're looking at these numbers.
Okay, fantastic. Do you have something to add, Trudy, or is that?
Sure. So yeah, I think any workplace strategies out there, like we're in the business of collecting data. And firstly, what we do before we kick off a project with a client, usually we set parameters, exactly what is meaningful data for them to make meaningful decisions. Sometimes they like to look at benchmarking data. Sometimes they go back to their own data. And essentially, we focus the efforts around obviously utilization of the spaces previous to the pandemic. And then we also look at occupancy data, and we look at and we also dissect productivity. So I understand this is a really, really sort of intangible topic to create some matrix around it, but what is interesting is creating a dialogue and creating some parameters. So how do we measure productivity now, which is really relevant, because productivity around how people work in terms of work performance, and productivity of the space. So how the space performs and how the space is supporting people's work. So we sometimes look at 4 parameters around the space, workspace, around connectivity, and then around wellness, and also actually there's one more, productivity. Yeah, so essentially the data point is all around people and space, and then we go into a dialogue with the client to say what matters to you the most, and then we set out a prioritization list.
Okay, good. So we're talking about, getting to that fit for purpose and trying to tailor it to the client needs. And when we talk about, we've kind of touched upon this in different aspects when we talk about, the need to focus on the individual and the humanizing aspects of work. Particularly, we talk about issues around diversity and neurodiversity. But I'd like to hear from, starting with you, Kat, about your perspectives on what do organizations need to get right as they reimagine the next workplace.
Thank you. I am very passionate about this, and I know that Partha and Trudy both shared some amazing insights around people and culture and having this radical transparency to really shift from command and control toward a more empowering, encouraging workforce. So the main threads really are that first chief priority across industries and across disciplines truly will be both well-being, yes, in terms of health and physical well-being, but also in terms of mental well-being and SEL, going into social and emotional learning. So normalizing that we need to make space for an entirely humanized workforce in respect with, as I mentioned before, the increasing neurodiversity that is happening during this period of isolation. But another key factor and consideration as we humanize and move forward into this hybrid activity-based workplace model is respect, which is going to include greater self-discipline and accountability on the individual. So having this supportive structure to showcase your entire self will also allow you to then express that accountability. So I think those two are really tied together, and it'll be really encouraging to see leaders that can step up and move forward with more empathy rather than control, and allow for to really step into their leadership roles as facilitators and to facilitate an environment, however virtual, where employees are able to show that accountability and show their impact through their work.
Oh, I mean, that's quite an interesting take. I like that. That's a interesting discussion that opens up a whole nother series of questions for an entire webinar. But Partha, I'd like to hear your perspective. What do organizations need to get right? We had the focus on the individual and the empathy from Kat. What do you see?
All the good words have been spoken by Kat already, and I like the word empathy, and I'll just give you an example rather. But I completely second what she's saying. For example, things used to be done to employees, knowledge workers in India. Things used to be done. This is how it is done. People do not like when things happen to me, when things are done upon me, and they are now speaking up. Organizations have realized this, and they don't really like this. But what is happening is, when we recently did a survey for, all employee survey in Mumbai, the bias that we went into was that people will report to the office for collaboration. That's the global narrative, right? So you go back to the workplace because you need to socialize, because you need to collaborate. Surprisingly, a large majority of people actually said that I will go back to the workplace because I need to do focused work, because I cannot focus in the work, because homes in Mumbai are small. Your living room is your children's school, your parents, everyone's living there. There's no space to actually do focused work. And this was a complete surprise that, oh, I actually need to provide more focused work space in the office. So what I'm trying to say is that people are being listened to. They're actually listening to employees, and that's where I link it back to what Kat said, that empathy has to be there now. And this is something which I've actually seen in the last 3 to 4 months coming in, that you're listening, you're not doing things onto your knowledge workers.
Okay, fantastic. Trudy, do you have anything to add as a final thought, because we're running to the end of our webinar here?
Yeah, very much echoing what Kate and Partha, and essentially, I guess what organizations need to get right is what people need now. Yeah, listening, and also creating environments to listen, because it's no good to just hear everybody out, and it's really a case of what kind of environments, what kind of platforms are we collecting all these voices and feedback, and what do we use with the comments and feedback that they provide, and how do we use it strategically to really make people feel that they're heard, and also the organization is supporting in the bigger scale what is best for people and for the business. So have a checklist and check them off, and prioritize your list of what matters to the business and what matters to people the most, and then have an open dialogue. Yeah, and then I think that would, because every organization is very different. There's no one size fits all. As many strategists would say, there's no one strategy that can fit everybody. So yeah, you need to find your own solution, do some reflections, ask a lot of questions, but ask it in the format that you can actually collect the responses in a structured way for it to be meaningful and useful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for your fantastic insights and sharing the diverse range of perspectives, not only of professional backgrounds, but also from the diversity that is across the Asian environments and their experiences at the COVID-19 pandemic and the return to the next normal workplace. As a final outro from my side, before I give the word over back to Katie, please, you can download the study at experts.ifma.org. You can get the executive summary and dig into some of the greater details on that. So from my side, from Copenhagen, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today and to present some of the findings and to moderate this fantastic panel. Katie, over to you.
Thank you, and this hour went very quickly. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Trudy, Kat, and Partha for this great webinar and discussion. And it's really fascinating for me to hear and learn and just see all the, well, diversity and regional differences and variations that we have, and just to learn more from that. And I hope that you have all enjoyed this webinar, and if you are not yet a member of WE but would like to be, I'd recommend you to visit our website, www.ifma.org, and you can find more information, and also lots of our webinars are recorded there, and you can just look at them. You'll find all our WE Hub leaders and can contact them and can contact me. And if there is not yet a WE Hub close to you in your region, maybe you would like to start one. So you can just go to the website and learn all about WE and just contact us, and hope to see more of you. And thank you all of you for joining us today, and hope to see you soon again. So thank you from all of us, and bye.